Everybody, and welcome back to the Ketogenic Fasting Project. Thanks for watching my video or listening along at least. Today we're doing another book look. The name of this book is The Vegetarian Myth, Food, Justice, and Sustainability by Lierre Keith. Now again, I listened to the audiobook on this. I'm a big fan of audiobooks, being dyslexic myself. So it is available on Audible, and of course it's available in print pretty much all over the place, I think. So I do recommend this book. I think people should read it. Of course, I have a biased opinion, and I freely admit that. So, anyways, see what was in it. I have a lot of empathy for Lierre Keith because she went on a ketogenic diet, or I'm sorry, she went on a vegan diet, thinking it was the best thing she could do for herself or for the planet. And I think we've all noticed a lot of pressure towards that type of thinking. I know it seems to me like my entire life, like meat is bad and vegetables and fruits are good. You should just eat lots of fruits and vegetables whenever possible. And, of course, vegan is a step beyond vegetarian. It's a little more stricter philosophy and a little bit smaller category of food for sure. So I think a lot of people wind up on a carnivore or ketogenic diet for the same reasons that she wound up on a vegan diet. At least there's a lot of overlap, right? Um, and we all want to do the right thing, right? At the core of it. But unfortunately for her, she developed some serious health problems. She battled depression. She has permanent spine damage, and it took her a long time to realize that it was the diet that was doing it. Which, I understand. I think a lot of it's just, even if you're eating the typical diet where you're supposed to be eating fruits and vegetables and grains, and you're like, hey, why have I got so many cavities in my teeth, or how come I'm tired all the time? Why am I gaining weight? And, on and on and on. I, Thinking that you're on a vegetarian or vegan diet is probably just a step towards, well, this is going to be healthier, it's going to be more sustainable, might even be more affordable, right? It's the right thing to do. So, and that way I have a lot of empathy for her situation because I think a lot of people could have gone down that road. Oh, a lot of people have, but I think a lot more people could have, and it's really kind of a toss of the coin. So she comes to grips with the fact that a vegan diet is what is destroying her health, and eventually she finds a doctor who has experience helping vegans whose diet has caused them health problems. So a lot of the problems she's having were misdiagnosed along the way. She comes to realize that, there's no food without death. She tried to do some farming herself, at least grow some of her own food. And she really struggled with just how to kill the slugs that are eating all her lettuce and stuff like that. And she got her hands dirty and really tried to garden in a way that didn't require animals. She realized it just doesn't work that way because nature already had a plan, and there's not much we can do to circumvent that. So I can understand that too. I mean, probably all go through phase in our life where, like, it's like we don't really want to see even a snail get killed, but at the same time, we realize that there's limits to every ideology, right? She really gets into how grain cultivation destroys the soil and kills animals. you know, there's kind of a lot of propaganda, I guess, as far as being on a vegan diet. You think you're sparing life, but then you realize that, when they cultivate a field full of wheat or corn or soybeans or whatever, that you're going to be killing animals and all kinds of other plants, obviously, in order to grow them. And she comes to realize that we evolved to eat meat. This isn't necessarily a book about being a strict carnivore, I don't think, but she definitely is leaning in that direction. She actually goes and visits a permaculture farm, and she realized how little those people have to eat and how they don't seem to be all that healthy. And like I mentioned, she experimented with the vegan gardening. Now, the author's perspective isn't just about I was a vegan, my health suffered, I realized I need to eat meat, and that the veganism doesn't work, but there's also a lot of what I guess is best described as social constructionism, or there's a number of paradigms, social construction paradigms that are mentioned in it. They revolve around masculinity, anger, hierarchy, patrilineal structures. Anyways, I'm not really going to get into that. Some people probably enjoy that part of the book. I didn't really see it as being particularly important. I kind of look at people developing agriculture to stave off um, hunger, and not having to move around trying to find animals. I don't really see that farming or agriculture requires somebody to form hierarchies um, just to control the surplus or whatever. I think the hierarchies are going to exist with or without that. So I don't know. I mean, it's certainly entertaining. It's worth entertaining the thoughts, but I probably part ways with her on most of that. But it doesn't really detract from the book. It's like anything. You can't agree with everybody all the time. And just because people inject ideas that you may or may not disagree with doesn't mean that the the structure of the book itself or the ideas behind choosing a different diet really change. So she talks about how the plow destroys the earth and how monoculture, which is essentially, where we grow the same crop over and over again in the same field, requires chemical fertilizer, and the fertilizers that we use, these nitrogens, are typically derived from petroleum products, and eventually we're going to run out of petroleum. The destruction of topsoil, which is a major issue, and of course a lot of this revolves around wheat, corn, and soy. And as it turns out, not those three items are not all that nutritious. In fact, they're probably downright dangerous to our health. There's probably something that should be eaten in extreme moderation. So, and of course, monstrous industries have developed behind them. She surprised to find out that the science behind a meat diet already existed. The science behind eating grain does not. Fruits and vegetables are not all they're cracked up to be. Soy can be, you can't put an infant on strict soy milk or something like that because it's going to make them very ill. She mentions a survey of vegan children. Turned out, I think in the summertime, like 28% of them had rickets, and in the winter it went up to over 50%. She talks about some of the horrors of potential horrors of trying to live on a vegan diet. And I know common criticism of people who were on a vegan diet and left because it was unhealthy. People say, well, you just didn't do it right, you know. So there is that, but I think she's tilted over to the same side that I'm on, where it's like, well, we think that meat is the core of the human diet. And that's just what we evolved to eat, whether we like it or not. The book is very impassioned. It's very emotionally charged. It's very factual as well. So there's plenty of fact. There's plenty of studies and other authors that are mentioned. And of course, this concept that pastures and prairies and savannas and forests really are the natural state. That's where the animals should live, and we eat those animals. And perhaps that's what we should go back to. Now, maybe that's going to limit the population of the planet, or the capacity of how many people we can feed. And her numbers were low. I think she said like 600 million or something like that. So I don't really know. I've never even tried to do the math, but it's still something to think about. And I think we've already seen that the more wealthy or affluent countries become, the fewer children they have. And so perhaps people will start changing their views on having children, because more and more people are ascending out of poverty. It's the way of the world. There's less and less wars, less and less crime, there's less disease, especially if we could deal with obesity, diabetes, cancer, the autoimmune diseases, stuff like that, which I believe is caused by a high carbohydrate diet. Then we would really significantly improve things. And people seem to be a lot more resistant to infection on a meat diet. So probably need fewer antibiotics and have less worry about necrotizing fasciitis. So she does kind of talk about a future dystopia where, the suburbs will be reclaimed by the earth because fuel is too expensive. You just can't commute out to the suburbs anymore. But I just happened to be walking the dogs when I was listening to that part. I was walking around my neighborhood, and I'm like, I already drive to and from work in an electric car. It's an old car by today's standards, and I built a solar array in my backyard with my own two hands that provides power for that car. And I follow flying cars. I know they seem sort of fictitious at times, but there's actually some pretty viable flying cars out there where you don't even really need roads. Maybe, I think most people aren't crazy about giant asphalt belts everywhere. And, I hate the asphalt, especially when it's got potholes in it. But, the the future isn't necessarily going to be the same, but it doesn't necessarily mean we all have to cluster into giant cities, So more and more people telecommute, and of course there's buses and trains, and so all those options are there. And I know where I live, the suburbs are connected to the city by by trains, and I actually commute from one suburb to another for the most part, so. And then there's a movement of hydrogen. If you look at some of the work that other people have done, I think one of the best diagrams I ever saw was done by Michael Crichton or something like that. Mankind has been moving in the direction of hydrogen fuels and away from carbon fuels. There's a mixture of the very high carbon fuels that we started with, and as we move along, we've been naturally progressing towards fuels that contain more hydrogen, and now are actively working. I say I mean, there's a lot of science and industry and policy behind developing hydrogen fuel. So I think a lot of that really will change things. So I do think it is a good book, and I think other people will enjoy it. So I'd rather have somebody be passionate that I disagree with than waste my time, especially since there is a lot of overlap between this book and the last one I read, the Carnivore Manifesto. And of course, Gary Taubes comes up in it, and his original article in the New York Times was, "What if it's all been a big fat lie?" And his book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, I think gets a mention. Not to mention a lot of the same studies are quoted, like the giant ones, like the Framingham hand study, which I just was talking about with my doctor the other day. So anyways, please subscribe to my channel, give it a like if you don't mind, and pass the links on to the videos to other people so they can get something out of it. And if you get a chance, read this book or listen to it. So I think it's a good one, and I think you'll get something out of it. So anyways, I hope this helps somebody else out there.